Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutt with HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Friday the 13th, 2021, and it's time to talk tropics here. Tracking Fred down there near Cuba or somewhere. It's kind of hard to know. It's a mess. I mean, look at that. The background satellite picture there for the thumbnail and title card. You know, you'd look out there and you go, well, maybe that's Fred over there under the word Grace. And yes, we'll be talking about what I think will be future tropical storm Grace as well. All right, so happy Friday the 13th to you. Is it okay to say that? I guess so. It's just a made-up thing, but whatever. Let's move along and take a look at what's happening in the tropics here. And our interactive map off the Hurricane Track Insider site. Linda in the eastern Pacific turning along. Going to be a pretty strong hurricane. I can say this because it's not going to affect anybody. Finally, we're going to get a strong hurricane out here. I say finally because lately all these storms that have formed have been rather feeble, and at least this one, when it gets strong, it'll be moving away from land, so you can kind of root for it and be awed by it and whatever, and nobody can get mad at you because it's doing what they're supposed to do, and that is kind of transferring heat out of the oceans into the upper atmosphere and dissipating it. Nature's heat engine, our air conditioners. No threat to California, Baja California that is, or California proper, or Mexico, or anything like that. Maybe some swells will get generated from it and head up towards the Baja. And if it's a Cat 3 sitting out here south of LA and San Diego, yeah, it might send some swells up towards those areas as well. So if you know any good breaks out there where you can catch those southerly swells, you might, get lucky. So just watch out for the sharks and whatever, right? They still have great whites out there in that cold water. Anyway, in the Atlantic, we do have over here, somewhere along the coast of Cuba, I guess, is the center of Fred, and it's forecast to move up along the Florida Straits and eventually towards the panhandle of Florida. I believe that it's going to be a little bit more to the west with the eventual landfall, somewhere between maybe Pensacola and Destin or Fort Walton Beach, somewhere around there. Maybe as far west as Mobile or Gulf Shores. We'll see. The weaker this stays, longer, the more west it's going to track, and probably going to go on the left side of the guidance envelope there and the cone of uncertainty. Right now, as I'll show you on the satellite imagery, it's a real mess. Then we have PTC number, what is this, number 6 out here? Number 7, sorry. We're already up to 7. How about that? Potential tropical cyclone, that's what that means. And it's expected to strengthen and become a tropical storm as it moves through the northeastern Caribbean, possibly passing over a lot of these islands in here, some of these same areas where Fred just impacted, and this is coming up over the weekend. Maybe some more heavy rain for Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the other islands here of the northeast Caribbean Sea. And then, yes, perhaps right over Hispaniola again, where more heavy rain could lead to more problems. So we're going to have to really watch this, see where it ends up. I'm going to show you a couple of interesting things. I know you guys are aware of the GFS runs from last night, a couple of snapshots of perhaps things to come, and we're going to do some comparing and contrasting of those models in just a little bit. First, the wide infrared satellite shot here from Tropical Tidbits. There is Linda in the eastern Pacific. Fairly sizable hurricane. It's not tiny, so if it does become a Category 3 out in this area through here, yeah, you guys might get some swell action up here in Southern California and the Baja, Cabo San Lucas. Maybe they would come in from the southwest. We'll keep an eye on that. I'll try to find some info on that. I'll put that as a reminder. Talk about the swells because, yes, people follow my work who live in the west, even along the coast of California. Maybe they were from back east, or they just have a general interest in weather, and some of those people are surfers, and despite the cold temperatures and the great whites, I joke about that, there's great whites everywhere, right? Surf weather, the big waves, if you know how to do it, that can be exciting, and I encourage you to take advantage of it if you can do so safely. So here is Fred, somewhere down there, like I said. We'll look at it on a visible satellite picture in a minute and see if we can play detective and figure out where the center is. This is an upper level low. This is some energy on the southeast side of that upper level low flaring up. None of these are PTC 7. That is PTC 7. soon to be Grace. How soon? I guess we'll find out. Maybe in the next couple of days or so. So let's zoom in here on the visible satellite, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, the high-res visible. A couple of things to note. Look at the wind kind of blowing this way in the upper levels, but at the lower levels you have the wind and the storms going this way. So it's kind of this hodgepodge of weather happening. Some broad turning in here, as you can see, definitely noticeable in there, but this is not a well-organized system, getting tangled up over Cuba and the adjacent waters. Very heavy rain over portions of Cuba, which can lead to some serious flooding, as we know. And some of that squally weather is now starting to make its way towards southern Florida through the Keys from time to time. And just this general big air mass of energy and juice, if you will, in the atmosphere is going to continue to contribute to potentially heavy rain for these big population areas of South Florida. So really slow down if you're on the roads down there. US 1, take your time going in and out of the Keys. I-75, the Highway 41 corridor, you name it. Be careful down there. Heavy rain can ruin your day quite literally. But looking at the overall structure here, Fred is just not that well organized. So in the short term, as it tracks through this area and gets into the southeast Gulf, whatever path it takes, it's not going to strengthen very much. So this is not, I'm going to emphasize this, going to be a big wind problem in terms of a well-developed, banded, structurally banded tropical storm or a hurricane or anything like that. So the wind and the surge are not going to be a big issue. But you get one of these thunderstorms developing right over you, and you can have a very small area. Key West could get one, right over Naples, right over somewhere in Collier, or Naples is Collier, Lee County, Fort Myers, for example, right in downtown Miami, Hialeah, whatever. You understand? A big thunderstorm cell can pop up right over you, dump 2 or 3 inches of rain in a short amount of time, and some significant downburst wind. And any wind that is in the atmosphere moving along horizontally, those thunderstorms go up, tap that wind, bring it down vertically, and a main driver of that in these types of thunderstorms from tropical systems is the heavy rain. That rainfall is cooled air. It drags down that wind that's circulating horizontally and brings it down to the surface in the form of these downbursts, and that can knock down trees, cause some scattered power outages. I'm just saying, look, give this the respect that it needs. It's a bigger weather feature than you are. It's not a big deal for a lot of people, but it could be a big deal for you individually. So just be aware of it. It's out there, not very strong, but it can still have impacts. Moving on to the east, potential tropical cyclone number 7. Pretty well organized here, very tight circulation in here. Pretty close to becoming a depression. This one's moving along pretty quickly now at plus 20 miles per hour, or 20 plus, whatever. Whereas Fred is moving much slower. And so this is moving briskly along, blobs of convection with it, some banding trying to get going, and it's got a pretty good moisture feed overall with it. So yeah, I think this has a pretty good shot at becoming eventually our next named storm, which would be Grace. So here's Fred and its moisture content. This is the total precipitable water animation out of the University of Wisconsin website. Lots of energy down here with Fred. And then here's PTC7. Interestingly enough, look out in front of it, this big moisture surge ahead of it. Some dry air to the north, mid-level dry air right there. That's what these lighter colors show. But that purplish color, pink color, whatever that's showing up in here, yeah, PTC7 there, 95L, whatever you want to call it, does have a lot of energy and water, vapor, humidity, moisture to work with. Not abundant dry air to inhibit it, so it just kind of has to slow down a little bit, organize itself, and I think it could become a named storm as it reaches the islands here in the middle to latter part of the weekend. And then more energy coming off of Africa and lots more energy over Africa to come out later on. It's going to be a busy time. We saw this coming months ago, and here it is starting to really come to fruition, and we're still not even to the mid part of August just yet. Almost, but about a week away from the climatological ramp up of the season that we would expect. There's the vorticity signature of Linda. That's what a hurricane looks like, with the vorticity really nice and intact. Pretty good vort max or vort signature there of Fred, rounded as it may be, still kind of disorganized, but the bones are there, the structure's there, and most certainly that is the case here for 95, PTC 7, whatever. So, these systems have potential, but will they live up to that potential? Well, we can look to this for some clues. Upper ocean heat content first with Fred. Doesn't really matter through here too much because there's a lot of land, but once this gets into the Gulf, it has a pretty good area of upper ocean heat content to work with on its way towards the Florida Panhandle. So, yeah, it could strengthen if the upper level winds allow. So we'll have to watch that very closely over the next couple of days. Not as big of a concern for wind and surge for the peninsula, but maybe some more wind and surge issues for areas of the Florida Panhandle. We're going to need about another day, I think, and then we're going to know a lot better about how that could shape up. So, this is headed towards the weekend and into the weekend. Probably would see impacts along the Florida Panhandle closer to Monday and Tuesday. But you could have some swells coming out ahead of this if it starts to ramp up, and that could cause some problems for beachgoers up along the Panhandle. But we'll start to really address this more tomorrow. Now for 95 or PTC 7, right now it's located in this general vicinity, crossing the 50-degree... Oh, hi, I'm back. I was trying to hit the H hotkey for my highlighter right there. It's crossing the 50-degree longitude line. And once it does so and gets into this area, upper ocean heat content begins to really go up. And yes, there's plenty of energy for it to tap into. Real quick, going back to Fred and its potential, you look at all this yellow and orange and red and you might think, ugh, yikes. Probably. At this point, yeah, it is yikes, because we're talking 30, 31 Celsius. That's getting it. So not only is this the surface water that's very warm, 85, 86, 87 degrees Fahrenheit, but the upper ocean heat content that I showed you a moment ago is also there. So as Fred comes across here and does whatever it's going to do, let's say it makes landfall something like this, it'll have some really warm water to work with there in that last day or so. And if the trajectory is wider and it comes closer to the Pensacola area, or even more wide than that somehow, and ends up near Orange Beach and Gulf Shores, you never know, then yes, it has plenty of very warm water, 30 Celsius plus, to work with. So we could be looking at more impacts than people are expecting somewhere along the Panhandle and as far west as Alabama. We'll see. I'm going to really be watching this closer and closer now. I know it's a mess today, but they only need about 12 to 18 hours of ideal conditions, and they can really ramp up. I don't see that happening. There's nothing obvious right now except the very warm water, but you never turn your back on these things. You got to always be mindful that they can pull some punches on you, even in that last day before landfall. So, real quick, last night, we all saw it. If you watch the tropics, I'm not going to pretend that people don't go and look at the long-range models beyond 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, 16 days. The GFS goes out to 384 hours, and there's nothing wrong. I'm not going to sit here and lecture you about what to do, as long as you understand what you're looking at, that you see it in context, and that anything beyond 3 to 5 days really starts to get into that sort of chaos theory land. People call it fantasy land, whatever. That things get blown up in the model, and many times it's just not even going to happen at all. But sometimes you get the clue from the models, if you see the same thing over and over, even at the long range, that something could be coming. It kind of shows you symptoms. So last night, we all saw this. I'm going to show you as an example. First of all, here's Fred. This is the 0Z run last night, GFS, 850 millibars. There's the ridge of high pressure over the Atlantic. That is 95L. So let's see what happened. And just to show you here, over the next 10 to 12 days, it takes 95 and really blows it up there stalls it out in the vicinity of the Bahamas, kind of reminds you of Dorian a little bit, and then it moves on up into my neck of the woods, and it's like, yikes! But then you got to look at something. 288 hours out. That's more than 10 days. That's a long time. And so to sit there and go, oh my gosh, a hurricane for the Outer Banks. No, not necessarily. And I mean, really, that's just, and especially when we do this. Let's just move this up to, in fact, I've got it queued up over here. Let's look 12 hours later at the same model, GFS, but this is the 12Z run. 12 hours later, same kind of deal. Okay, there. Oh, wait a minute. Where is it? It's not there. It goes into the Gulf, and it's just like, pfft. So look, come on. 12 hours later, you went from this to, and let's move this out to around 288 or so. It's not quite the same. It'd be about 282 or so, right? That's about the same time frame. 0Z Wednesday. Let's move this to 0Z. Sorry. They're not going to line up because it's a difference of 12Z versus 0Z, but this is roughly the same time frame. Interesting that it still shows it getting there. That is some of the energy that still ends up in eastern North Carolina. That's kind of odd. But from a Cat 4 to remnants of something in 12 hours of the same model. But look at the other puzzle pieces. Let's see what those show. Pretty strong ridge of high pressure sitting out over the western Atlantic here. That's in both runs. It's there. One of them has a big hurricane on the western end of it. The other one does not. So the bottom line is, when you look out into that Fantasyland range, please, please, please understand the limitations that, even a 24-hour model interpretation can be off. And as we look at the 12Z for today and what it shows, I mean, look, very little activity even in the next 42 hours headed towards the islands, whereas the 0Z run last night at that same time frame shows a much stronger system going through the islands. You understand that? So that's a big difference there. So just be careful with what you're looking at, and don't let it worry you. That's the main thing. It's just not worth it. So anyhow, 42 hours out, 48 going up to 72 and beyond GFS. And it goes the other way too. It's kind of weak there with Fred, and that is 78 hours out. And a lot of times people will post model runs. Maybe some people have, and I'm showing you that extreme scenario because there's context behind it. But you've seen it. People will take that one model run that I showed you at hour 288 and plaster it on Facebook somewhere. Oh, giant Cat 4 hurricane's coming, and they upplay it, right? They hype it up or whatever. 288 hours out, whatever. The same can happen if you look at just 78 hours out, and you say, well, that's not much up there along the Florida Panhandle. We don't know that that's what's going to happen. We can certainly hope that that's all there is of Fred along the Florida Panhandle, but there's that outside possibility that you could downplay this. You could look at this, maybe you're heading there yourself, and you're like, 78 hours out, model's got to be pretty good at that time frame. Yeah, but they're still fallible. They can goof up, have issues, whatever. We can hope that Fred is that weak, if you will, that disorganized. That is not much of a reflection at the 850 level. We can look at it down at the surface, see what the surface shows, and you get the idea. What is that, about 1,000 millibars? No, that's nothing to get all worried about. But what if it's not? What if it's 990 and darn near a hurricane? You never know. Even at 78 hours, things can be vastly different than what the model is showing for the future. Just keep that in mind. All right, real quick, the Euro, as we wrap things up, just comparing, this is the 12Z run today, August the 13th. This is every 24 hours. And you see Fred, which is located here somewhere. This is the other impulse, PTC7, coming into the frame. Move this out 24, 48. Now look, this is interesting. I will say this. A bit more of a reflection in, I mean, it's right over Brent's area, pretty close to it. Our good buddy Brent down in the Virgin Islands. That's a pretty decent reflection there. That would bring probably tropical storm conditions one way or the other. And there's Fred, a little bit more energized in the Euro than it shows in the GFS at hour 48. And then at hour 72, this is what I'm talking about. They're not quite an exact match, but, let's just line these up, shall we? At 72 hours, this is 78, there's 72. So let's get these lined up. So there's the Euro, there's the GFS. The Euro's a little stronger with Fred, and a little bit more to the west, which is what I was talking about. You give it a little bit more time, and yeah, that could be a bigger problem. We shall see. So at hour 72, there's Grace or whatever, PTC 7 north of Hispaniola. There's Fred, and then finally at 96 hours, Fred is inland over Alabama, big rainmaker, severe weather threat potentially, and PTC 7 is over here. Who knows? Again, this is 4 days out. Things could be vastly different. Finally, at day 5, the remnants of Fred sitting here over eastern Tennessee. There's PTC 7. Is this what will happen? You're going to have to stay tuned. I don't know. Nobody knows for sure, but the pattern seems to favor stronger systems than what we're seeing. And if that ends up being the case, just 5 days out, let's say that Fred is stronger, that we do have Grace, and maybe it's a hurricane by then. I'm just saying maybe. This would be an interesting test because both the GFS and the ECMWF model are supposed to be really good, and they've tweaked them lately, trying to beef them up a little bit. So to me, this is going to be a really big test, and if these systems really don't materialize, then we're just not quite there yet, and the pot will continue to be watched to see if it's going to boil over. Not that anybody's hoping it will, but an interesting few days ahead for a lot of reasons. All right? You guys have a great rest of your Friday. As always, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, we are on Facebook. Usually our good friend CJ handles updating Facebook at facebook.com/HurricaneTrack. I do all the Twitter stuff, and we have a good group of people that helps with the background thumbnails and graphics and live streaming, from Mike to Tim to Kari, myself, CJ, on YouTube. youtube.com/HurricaneTrack. Good to have you following along. I appreciate your time and your attention. I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. We'll talk more over the weekend.